coding is like playing cricket,
It's
or
like a meditation.
it's fun for them. The most motivating work for engineers is when they are not chasing an outcome, because then they are in control. The best engineers learn how to hone that skill and how to keep polishing that skill. If you start enjoying coding as a pastime, that's when you really spend your evenings, weekends doing and drinking with, and some of the best engineers in the world come out of that kind of behavior.
How do they filter the talent based on the open source contribution?
It's a cultural phenomenon. You have to make people understand that it's a big change, and unless you are adopting it, you are getting obsolete.
Hi, all. Let me introduce today our guest, Harshil Mathur. He needs no introduction. He's a CEO and co-founder of Razorpay. He himself is a great techie whom I know for last 10 years. IIT Roorkee, 2013 batch, mechanical, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation with him today on this podcast. Harshil, Razorpay is now 10 years plus, and I could actually say that the UPI and Razorpay actually born almost like a similar time. And I remember the contribution you and Shashank made on the whole conceptualization, designing, and the inputs on the UPI architecture. So in that sense, I think it's great to feel about that. It's like two great things happened at the same time. If I have to just go back the 10 years, your tech stack, your technology advancements, how would you like to throw some light on this?
Yeah, so first of all, on UPI, when we were starting Razorpay, at that time we were reading a lot about payments and all that. And I remember reading the draft consultation
Yeah.
paper on UPI, and I looked at it and I was wowed.
Yeah.
I was like, this is going to fundamentally change how payments happen. It was such a beautiful piece of paper because it borrowed ideas from everywhere else in the world and then said what is the best for India, and went very technical. So I, as a techie, loved reading it because it went into protocols, it
Yeah.
went into specific language to be used,
Yes.
specific consent mechanisms, authentication
Yeah.
mechanisms.
Yeah.
Like, it was really beautiful to read it, and I remember reading it and I was like, if this really happens, it's
Yeah.
gonna just change. And
Yeah.
of course, last 10 years has been a history on how that has happened. Going into our journey, right? So 10 years back when we started building Razorpay, I think one of the earliest thoughts that we had is that we are building payments, and in payments, reliability is
Yeah.
the most important thing, right? Like, so, what I can tell our techies is our business is like an electricity company, right?
Yeah.
It is, when it works fine, nobody cares. But if it goes down for 5 minutes,
5 minutes.
abuse it like anything, right? So nobody comes and says, "Hey, kya bijli aa rahi hai?" Right? Like, nobody cares about that. But 10 minutes if you're down, people are gonna be really angry. So it's like a utility business, and being up is the most important thing. It doesn't matter whether you ship the latest feature or if it's delayed by a week, if it's delayed by 2 weeks. But if you go down for a second in the hope that you'll be able to upgrade or do something better, people don't care what you are trying to do. So one of the earliest focus for us was, how do we make the system extremely reliable, extremely resilient? We used the cloud infrastructure from day one, and while I don't spend a lot of time on tech side now, given the large team, but at that point of time, the first infrastructure of Razorpay, I set it up myself because I was on the DevOps side.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time building the right kind of firewall architecture, building the right kind of database architecture to ensure that we can be extremely reliable. And over time, we kept expanding on it, we kept building on top of it. But the core principle for us was reliability over innovation. Even though innovation is extremely important, but reliability stays higher. So for example, even today, we don't allow new features to be shipped on the core platform in the day.
Harshil, I'm assuming, and NPCI ourselves has been biggest beneficiaries of this whole open source softwares, and the revolution happened since 2010 to 2020, and I'm sure Razorpay also would have been using that. How do you leverage the open source stack?
Yeah, it's amazing in the tech world. The contribution of open source and the dependence on open source is so underappreciated
Yeah.
at times. Like, so for companies like us, like, I mean, the entire stack, the core stack is open source. The language that we use, to the frameworks that we use, to the to the most core infrastructure, something as simple as SSL that we use to drive security is running on an open source platform. And generally, people realizes it when it fails,
Right.
and we realize that this is a small project by a small developer running in, like, sitting in Ukraine,
Right.
who's been writing this code that
Yeah.
your entire system is dependent on. And he's probably underfunded. He's probably one developer writing all of
Yeah.
it, and you don't know how much dependence you have on it. So of course we have been big beneficiaries of it, and we have tried to give back a lot. We have an open source program in the org. We actually have open source Fridays every month with the engineering team, where we ask people to present what did they contribute to open source and present to the
Wow,
team.
this is fantastic.
And we also publicly posted out that these are the contributions from our team in the open source world, and we encourage it. And in fact, I'll give an early story. So when we started using Razorpay, we were setting up for PCI certification.
PCI DSS
And
certification.
one of the things needed for that is an intrusion detection program, right? So
IDS, yeah.
So we used OSSEC, which is a very widely used open source IDS, and I was the one deploying it. And I realized that there's some feature that is needed by most companies. There's a new SSL upgrade that had happened, and it didn't support it. So I actually went ahead and contributed back to that program, and I'm still listed as one of the contributors to OSSEC in their GitHub repo. So and that's one thing I'm very proud of, that I contributed back to open source in some ways in the early days. But that's the culture that we try to propagate in the team as well. That hey, can we spend some hours of our every month of our Fridays just contributing to open source and tell our teams, and we give people time that if you are contributing to open source on this Friday, you don't need to spend your time on work, and we'll give you credit for that. But I think that covers the contribution part.
But when I look at the engineer's mindset, right, and that's very critical, because our idea of this whole playground to how do we motivate the engineering grads to look at the startups and the fintechs as a possible opportunities in their life after engineering, and how do you, when you encourage that from a company perspective, what's in for the engineer who's working for you? How does he look at it?
No, so first of all, we have to understand the engineering's mindset, and I was an engineer myself, so I
Yeah,
can relate a lot to it. Most engineers love to do stuff which have no really significant outcome. Like engineers love to code, and that's one thing that it's hard for a lot of business leaders to grasp with.
Yeah.
Like business leaders always work on, hey, if I do X, I need this outcome. If I do this, I need this outcome. That's how we like business leaders are conditioned. That's the best business leaders in the world are very driven by what is the outcome for me. Engineers are on the other side of the spectrum, right? So like I used to code in college, and I look back at the time, and we used to code. We would like a lot of projects and spend our evenings, nights, 24 hours coding and writing projects. If you look back today, there was no outcome for those projects. There's nothing that I was getting out of it. I would sit in hackathons, and there's generally a prize, but one person wins a prize, 100 people code. And today you have hackathons who do that. Some of the best engineers who like coding as a pastime. For them, coding is like playing cricket.
It's like a meditation.
Yeah, it's fun for them. So it's like, why do you play cricket? What's the outcome? Nothing. You're not going to play in the national sport, but you play cricket because you enjoy it. So for the best engineers, and in fact, the most motivating work for engineers is when they are not chasing an outcome, because then they are in control. Correct. So open source is one such area. That's one of the best ways to hone your skills. That's one of the best ways to use your pastime, and one of the best ways that you feel proud. So if you write a code, if you are able to push it to a public open source program, and it goes in that, like I know people in my college who used to spend their evenings coding on the main Linux repo, and they would be really proud if they could get one commit of theirs or added on the main repo. Because having your name seen in Linux contributors,
it's a pride.
It's a pride that you wear, and you put it on your GitHub repo, you put it everywhere. So that's the engineering mindset. So the best engineers learn how to hone that skill and how to keep polishing that skill, because like if you start enjoying coding as a pastime, that's when you really spend your evenings, weekends doing and drinking. And some of the best engineers in the world come out of that kind of behavior.
No, I think it's a great point. And today when we look, and we are going to talk about the AI, I think this whole open source contribution community, right? And I think from an India perspective, while India has really mastered the art of services economy, I think this open source contribution can itself become a big kind of a job creator for, and technically you don't need to be you don't need to be working somewhere to do that, right? You can start right from the engineering days, or maybe even pre-engineering days to kind of do it. I think it's a great idea, and I hope the India maybe there is some policy level incentivization, education
I
policy
think
or
it's just
something like that?
awareness part, and
Awareness part.
so one of the things that I do whenever I visit my college and a lot of colleges is tell engineering graduates that hey, if you contribute to open source, because recruiters today are looking at this,
Wow.
so it's one of the best ways to make your profile stand out. Like there's thousands resumes you get for any
Yeah,
role,
yeah.
but if you can demonstrate to somebody that hey, I
Yeah,
contributed to
if
this large,
you have done
like
the,
imagine if you can write in a resume that I'm listed as a contributor in the main Linux repo,
yeah,
your resume just stands out. So there is an outcome to that as well. Like there are recruiters today, there are tools that like companies like ours use, which try to look at people's GitHub profiles and
wow.
find out that these are the GitHub profiles that have contributed a lot and use
Fan-
that to hire.
Fantastic. So I think the companies also can now look at how do they filter the talent based on the open source contribution.
Yeah, because that's a real world impact. Like if
Real
you
world
are,
impact.
because if you're able to get your code committed into one of the largest global projects, then you know how to write good quality code. You know how to work with a large team. You know
Large
how to
team.
work with a distributed team. That's one of the best ways to demonstrate than any resume or any coding exam that you can give, that I can work with this in your team and contribute to it.
I think fantastic. I think the really deep tech companies can actually adopt it like a first principle while filtering the talent, and actually then it can have a ripple effect on how the engineers are spending their engineering time
Yeah.
during the engineering. How are they spending time?
Yeah.
What are they prioritizing? I think it has a great impact on that. Let's move to AI, and NPCI also is going through a huge transition. We started AI fairly early. We built up the team under Vishal, who's our transformation head. But I think what the one mistake I did is we remained a AI. Huge expertise on AI because the scale at we operate and the models. So how are you thinking about AI? I keep telling my HR that please look at the way you spoke about the open source contribution example in the resume. Look at the AI tool example in the resume. Otherwise, don't hire the person irrespective of whether he's working in product, HR, or anywhere. He has not worked with the AI tool. Then technically he's not a human plus AI. So how are you looking at AI?
I'll give an example. Like a lot of banks, when they looked at technology or when internet or digitization was happening, they created a separate team that this is a digital team. They'll focus on digitizing the bank. Everyone else continues to do their job. We now realize that's a foolish mistake because
I'm in front of you. I made that mistake.
so most people realize because the true digital companies where every aspect is being digitally will always outwin somebody who's doing digital on the side.
Yeah.
The same thing applies to AI. So if you put a team that hey, this is the team that does AI, everyone else just does their job. So your business team does business, your marketing does marketing, but there's a one team that's coming and putting AI on top. You'll always have patchwork. You'll always have things on top. So you can do some fluffy stuff on AI, but true AI differentiation wouldn't happen. So AI is a fundamental change. Every single team in the org needs to adopt AI because if your org doesn't, somebody else will. And whichever org is using AI, it's such a fundamental shift. Their outcome will be 10x of yours.
10x,
you can't compete with that.
You can't compete on.
Yeah, you can't say, hey, I have more resources, so I can compete. The outcomes will be so significant that it's unavailable. So first is like every team has to adopt AI, and that's hard. It's like the engineering part is actually related.
So how are you finding the mindset? How are you hitting the mindset to or incentivizing them to move to AI?
So it's multiple things. One is first enablement. We have provided resources to everyone, so every engineer has access to Copilot today, which allows them to code, which allows them to use because it makes far more efficient.
Yeah.
First you give that, then you do trainings. You train people. Okay, these are the engineering tools. These are the AI tools available today. This is how you can leverage them.
Yeah.
And then you track usage. So we track Copilot usage. We track, for example, we have now reached about 30 to 40% adoption, which I feel is very low. We need to reach like 100% adoption. So there are engineers who have access to Copilot, but you are using it to write only like 20-30% of the projects.
Yeah.
Rest of it, they're still doing this because it's hard to change behavior.
Hard to change the behavior. Somebody's just typing the commands and...
So you have to change that behavior. People are still searching on Stack Overflow and then copying code versus like asking the AI to do that. So I think that's when you track usage and then you push people that, hey, like, where do you feel the gap is? How can we retrain you? Can we do it? And I think that's when you drive behavior. The second thing that you spoke is on hiring. And it's not just engineers. For example, most of the business interviews that you do today, half of the questions that you ask in a business interview, people can answer with AI like this. Like you ask a ChatGPT, it'll give you the best answer.
Perfect.
Don't look at it as cheating. You find candidates who do that well. Because on business side also, why do you want people who sit on the entire 2 days and create a PPT when AI can do it in 5 minutes now? So we actually have started adding that as a competency in the hiring process, where we look for people who are leveraging AI and using that to bypass the interview. Like those are the best people. You want those kind of people.
We want, yeah.
Yeah, you who will say, hey, you need this PPT, I'll generate it in 5 minutes. I don't need to spend 2 days to write that PPT. So that's the second big aspect. But the third is, again, like AI will be something same as digital. It's a cultural phenomenon. You have to make people understand that it's a big change, and unless you are adopting it, you are getting obsolete.
Yeah.
Right? As a workforce, you're getting obsolete. As an individual, you're getting obsolete. As a company, we're getting obsolete if we are not adopting AI. So one of the things that we do, for example, now is we most teams host an AI learning session where we bring where the teams ask people to come in and present what they are doing using AI in their job. And there's a lot of cross learning that happens in that, because there are always people who are slightly ahead of the curve and who learned AI tools. They tell others that, hey, I'm now doing this. Now I'm doing this thing that we used to do. Now I'm using AI to do that. One thing that I am doing myself is try to use a lot of AI tools myself.
Yeah, and the same journey. I'm also.
Because unless you are like same thing. Like I mean,
can't
Dilip,
preach,
you know
you
this.
don't preach. You
if you are not at the top of your game, then you can't teach your team. You can't ask your team
And technically, we are not the CEOs, right? I'm just saying we are one of them, right?
We're one of them. So if you are not at the top of your game, you can't expect your team to be at the top of their game. So, for example, like 3 weeks back, I used this tool, Replit. I started using that. It's such amazing. I don't know if you've tried it. It's a programming tool, but it's not really like a programming tool.
Yeah.
So it's an app. You download it. You tell it that, hey, I need an app on this. In 5 minutes, it generates the app. Generates the app end to end. It is so beautiful. Like I like to calculate the calories I'm doing, and I asked it to create an app to track my calories. It created like any other, like MyFitnessPal or something. But then I said one step ahead. My biggest challenge is I don't want to enter each item. So at the end of the day, I want to send a voice note to you. Can you figure out from it and translate and note the things? And it integrated OpenAI. It asked me for the OpenAI key. It integrated OpenAI, generated the app, and then the app is something I'm using every day. And when you start doing that, then I was so amazed by it. I asked my entire leadership team that, hey, everyone needs to download this app today. Start using this today. Because then, like, for example, today now when an engineer comes in and says, hey, this page will take 2 weeks to deliver, I can say, hey, I can generate this in 5 minutes myself. Like, why can't you try using it? So you need to try these tools yourself, because otherwise you don't know where the world is moving.
You know, and I keep telling to our people that, or wherever I'm talking, that you are not competing with human now. You are competing with human plus AI. So if you don't have that AI into it, and whether it's a tool, it can be as simplistic as using the GPT, multimodal GPT to do some of the rudimentary tasks you're doing. If you're not optimized on yourself, there are no takers for you, right? So I think it's fantastic, and you spoke about 30% contribution in coding. It's really good. How do you deal with the risk, right? Because today there is a chance that the code might go outside or document might go. So how do you deal that inside Razorpay?
As our review process is still manual.
Review is manual.
Review is still manual, and we are not going to move to. So we can have one level of review as AI to find out if there is any gaps. But the final review has to be manual. And so generally, like in a coding environment, in like large tech companies like ours, typically the SD1s, SD2s will write code. There's a SD3 or principal engineers who will review. And I'll treat AI as a SD1 or an intern level who is writing code. For my principal engineer or my senior engineer, it doesn't matter. Whether an SD1 wrote that code or an AI wrote that code. They still have to review. They still have to check quality. And so the review process is still fully manual. And for them, the filter is the same. So tomorrow, maybe like half of the code that SD1s write is written by AI. My principal engineers and senior engineers will treat it like an SD1 and give feedback back on it. And most AI tools are also evolving that they can take feedback and then rewrite code. So the review process continues to be manual, and I don't think we are going away from there anytime soon.
Fantastic. I think I'm going to shamelessly use some of the principles on AI training, AI. The appreciation and those kind of things for the people who are really doing good on that. As a founder, CEO, right? Your and the way AI, you spoke about the AI going to make your game 10x, right? Similarly, the talent, right, is also the X factor for your success, right? In that sense. So as a founder, CEO, how do you ensure that, if there is a best talent, right, and the Razorpay needs that best talent, how do you match it up? How do you attract that talent, and how do you signal that you are the organization where the talent should come and work for?
That's a hard problem, and it's harder because the expectation of today's workforce is very different, especially on engineering side,
Yeah.
than what it used to be. So it's not about who gives the most money or most
Yeah,
resources. I think
I
those are
guess
table
so.
stakes now.
Yeah,
Like, if
yeah.
you're a large tech company hiring the best engineers, you have to give in the top 90 percentile. You have to be the top 90 percentile payer. You have to give the best ESOPs. All of that has become table stakes, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
I think what matters to today, and for example, like almost 60 to 70% of hiring today for us is still referral. And the reason for that is people like to find places where they like working and then bring people along with
Along
them.
with
So,
them, yeah.
so the best engineers go to places where other best engineers tell them, hey, this is a good place to work. This is a good engineering culture. And that is becoming important because like today, like with the salary levels of engineering graduates and the top tier
Yeah,
engineering
yeah.
folks, right? Like the delta between X salary level and 20% more is not significant. Their lifestyle is already the best it could be in
Yeah.
a city like Bangalore.
Bangalore.
Right? So now they're looking for how do they work in a place where they like working.
Yeah.
And that is a harder problem. So how do they find meaning in their job? And that comes a lot with empowerment, ability to take decisions, right? So if you're treating them like a servicing company that, hey, this is what you need to build and just build it, then that engineer won't
Yeah.
enjoy it. And secondly, like as I said, like tools like Replit is going to take that away. Like you're going to ask a tool and it will generate.
Generate,
You want
yeah.
engineers who are going to put their effort in and find out the small things that differentiate you.
Yeah.
And that will come in when people enjoy when you're giving a problem statement to them versus giving a just build this out. So we involve engineering in every step of the decision making process. Our engineering teams are very deeply involved.
Yeah.
So in our business discussion, for example, when we are discussing, hey, we are facing customer support issues and we need to build a better product around it, our engineering teams are in the room.
In the room.
It's not like the business teams are taking the call, hey, this is not what we need to do, solve customer support. We decided, we created a spec, gave it to product created an engineering spec and gave it to engineer. Engineers are just coding.
Yeah.
If you're using engineers like code monkeys,
Yeah.
then you will hire code monkeys, right? So you have to use engineers as smart decision makers who you give a problem statement that, hey, we need to find the best way to do this and trust them to find the best way to do this. And then you will have the best engineers. So it's a self-fulfilling outcome. And a lot of companies mistake it because in most companies in India, I've seen a very business-led, where the business decides what needs to be done. Engineering is just an execution team. It's a servicing team inside a product company.
This is like, again, self-reflection, because I keep talking about that, the engineers must be involved in every business decision because they are the one who are building it. And if they don't know the real user experience, they won't be able to build the craft. Rightly said that, if the engineer is looking at an impact, one company may not be able to, or one work may not be able to give him that impact satisfaction, and he's going to fragment his time. The future of workplace is going to change. So how are you thinking about the future of work, or the future of the talent which is going to come back to us?
The Gen Z, as we call it, the Gen Z workforce is very different. And I think there are few things that differentiate them. I think for the generation before me, work was like pious, responsible thing that you have to do, and you have to go at 9 and you have to come back at 5. I think in our workforce, in our generation, it changed a bit where you work, but then work is work, and then you have play, and then work-life balance as a concept came in. Gen Z is very different. They're even more casual about work. That for them, work is a way for them to enjoy their life.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that, hey, you work and then whatever time is left you enjoy.
Yeah.
You work so that you can enjoy your life. And I think that mindset first is very different, and I think it's a good thing. People are moving to that direction, right? Where you work, but then you travel. You work and then you spend a weekends. You work and then you go out. Right? And I think that differentiation is going to become more and more important. And if you can't understand that, then you're going to lose the best workforce, because the best folks will have that option to find the places that respect that. So we spend a lot of time on doing that, and I think that's why a lot of new age workforces have a lot of fun elements, have a lot of collaboration elements built in. So you say, okay, hey, don't want to work like 8 hours at a stretch. You are more productive when you work for 2 hours and then you go out and play TT, and then you come back and maybe work for 1-2 more hours. We'll provide all of that in the office. You have all of this available. You want to step out, come back. We don't really care. We don't care when you swipe in your card or swipe out your card, as long as you're delivering the outcome. So it is going to become more outcome-driven work. Where, hey, we want you to build this, or we want you to solve this problem in this time frame, and then you take a call when you want to do. You show up 1 day a week and are still able to deliver it. You show up 5 days a week and unable to deliver it, like you are rewarded that way. So it's going to become more and more outcome-driven, which is going to be harder for managers to imbibe. I think the workforce has an easier time. So because for managers, it's just harder to track that. It's easier for a manager to say, hey, you are in office 7 days a week and 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
it's easy for me to say, hey, I know you have done your job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus when you make it outcome driven, then you do track the outcome. Is the outcome quality enough and all of that?
Correct.
And that requires the managers to be more informed, more aware of how much effort does it actually take to do that. And that's the reason most lazy managers go back to things like, I want to track your working hours, I want to track when you come in, because lazy managers don't want to put that effort in to understand what it takes to produce this outcome and then push your teams towards that outcome. So the smart managers, so first is, if you want that kind of the smart workforce, you need smart managers. And smart managers are the ones that who can get on the ground, who can question your team and say, hey, why would this take 2 weeks? That can be done in 1 week because I know how to do this in 1 week. So I can tell you. And then when you come to that kind of manager, then you have the best talent. So you need smart managers who are not lazy. And then you get the smart workforce who can work in that kind of environment.
And also change the KPIs, right? Look at the contribution on the how much is the quantity of code written, quality of code written, or the problem solved, something like that. I think the KPIs might have to change. And
so we call touch points or the points of completion. So how many points of completion did you put out? How many outcomes did you generate? And as long as you're generating that, if you're generating more outcomes than the other guy, it doesn't matter whether you were in 2 days in the office and this guy was 5 days in the office.
Right.
Like the outcome has to be commensurate. So
the
workforce, I think the long-term view I have is that the best workforce will become very outcome focused, especially in the world of AI. Like there's an engineer who leverages AI and delivers it quickly. The engineers who doesn't leverage AI and sits 5 days and does it. Which kind of engineer do you want? You want the AI guy to deliver the outcome. So the outcomes are going to be more determinate of performance, and I think we're going to move towards that. But first it requires managers to understand this and change their mindset. It's easy for a lazy manager to say, hey, I'll just track what I know how to track.
While Harshil, and I think while we spoke about the tech talent and the tools, the culture a lot, do you also work with some of the tech startups, tech entrepreneurs, and what's your engagement model with them, right? How do you create value for them, or how do they create a value for you? What's your collaboration with the younger startups in that sense?
I think one of the best ways to learn what is happening in the ecosystem is to interact with startups. We are a large company, so we can do a lot of innovation. But what's happening in the world, where the world is moving, the best way to learn that is just to speak to early stage startups. Because they are the ones coming with the disruptive ideas, changing things. So that's the reason.
And they don't have resources, so they are fighting that battle, right?
And most of the newest startups that are coming up today are AI first, truly AI first. Like companies like us are adopting it and trying to become AI first, but
likewise,
AI first. Like they're 5 people, they're doing 100 people outcome because doing AI on day one. So for me, I think that's why I started doing personal investing on the side. The purpose was not like the monetary outcomes.
But that whole learning and
startups is not the best way to make money. But the idea was that so that I get to interact with a lot of startups, I get to understand what they're doing, I get to question them, I get to mentor some of them, and then see how they are doing things. And there's so many learnings I've got by talking to these startups. Because I talk to these early stage startups and look at how they are delivering such amazing outcomes today. The early stage startups are doing so amazing outcomes with 2 people, with 3 people.
It's just like
look at that and you feel, hey, like
whatever,
what are we doing? We have 3,000 people.
It's like sleepless nights.
And sometimes you look at that and say, he's producing as much outcome as my company is. Right? So, and that makes you re-question your understandings and re-challenge the beliefs that you had. And I think that's one of the best ways that I do it. And I think every startup founder needs to do it. Like that's the best way that you can keep questioning your understandings.
So what's your future tech strategy? So one is the AI, right? I'm just saying that every CEO is now thinking on whether the company gets AI enabled, the company gets AI-fied fully, as you spoke about. But other than AI, what are you thinking that what are you going to be your tech plans on, or I'm just saying that while optimization and efficiency is one of the objectives. But how do you see the tech trends playing around worldwide, which are going to impact or enable Razorpay to do more?
Tech is a world that changes so rapidly, and especially in today's environment with AI, it's changing so rapidly, it's hard to keep up. And as I said, like one of the things that I try to keep doing is how do I use these tools myself to ensure that I am aware of where the world is moving. Right? It's just hard to keep up. So AI is, of course, the biggest trend, and it's going to be the fundamental driving force.
We just completed the NVIDIA's 4 days conference, and every day morning something is coming new.
Something new is coming. The Newton announcement. So first is just as a founder, as a CEO, I get to spend a lot of time in understanding where the world is moving. Because whatever I say today, like 3 months later, it's going to be a very different world. And like it's not moving at a pace of years now; it's moving at a pace of weeks.
Yeah.
And like tomorrow, OpenAI will launch a new model which does 20 more things that you
Yeah.
thought couldn't be done by AI for next 2 years.
2 years.
And that's the pace at which world is moving. So AI is going to be the fundamental driving force. But beyond AI, I think AI applied to specific solutions or specific problem statements is still yet to come in. So we are seeing generic AI. I think whenever a new technology comes, the first use case is generally very simple and
Simple. Yeah.
and lazy, right? So today people are just using ChatGPT to ask basic
Yeah.
questions. Hey, how do I do this? Hey, how do I do that? So it's a replacement for Google search,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
The deeper problem statements with AI are yet to come in. So
Yeah.
you'll see AI applied to, for example, insurance in a deeper way, into underwriting, into fraud detection.
Yeah.
We are seeing a lot of that. For example, we recently launched a buyer protection program which uses AI to identify fraud.
Yeah.
Because for when a fraudster buys something on a website versus when a real person buys, the way they interact is very
Interact,
different.
very
And a human can't notice it, but there's micro differences.
Micro differences.
Like a real person spends a lot of time understanding the pricing and features.
Yeah.
Fraudster doesn't care. So these are things that AI can do much more smoothly. So how do you apply AI to solve this?
Yeah.
We spoke about anomaly detection. How do you
Yeah.
apply AI to solve and figure out
Right.
common behaviors and predict that this is not
Right.
a common behavior and it's failing? So that kind of like the specific use cases and applying AI to specific use cases and solving the problem in a way that a human couldn't is going to be meaningfully change the world, right? So I would put it this way, that the cost of intelligence has gone down to zero.
Yeah.
So anything that needed intelligence to put in, you'll say, who will sit and do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you can
Just
pull
use
in
it,
AI.
just pull in the expertise.
You pull in AI. So
AI is your like a tutor, your
yeah,
expert.
so for example, if I look at fraud management, if I could have a human watch every single transaction happening,
Yeah.
I would reduce fraud.
Reduce fraud.
But you can't do that today. You can't put a human like today at a multi-billion transactions that UPI does.
Yeah.
You can't have a human. But you can have an AI now look at every single
every single
transaction,
transaction,
which is
yeah.
equivalent to a human,
Equivalent to-
and look at every single transaction and find out, hey, is this a real person? Is this not a real person? Is this a fraudster?
Right.
And do that. So the cost of intelligence is going down. The way you have to think is that if I had infinite number of humans available
Yeah.
and I could put them to everything,
Everything.
what else could I solve?
are the solve?
Because that's the intelligence level that's available to you now.
Understood.
And then you apply that framework. There's so many problem statements that you can solve if you could put a human to everything that you do. And that's what AI is giving you as an API now.
So Harshil, let's do some fun, rapid fire. So your first programming language,
Oh, I don't know. A lot of engineers will like it, but I use PHP.
PHP. Mine was Pascal. So I'm more ashamed to speak about. One startup that you really admire.
Globally, I'd say Amazon.
Amazon.
The execution machinery that Amazon has,
Execution machinery.
and not like combining the business strength and tech strength both. Very few companies are able to do that. Like they're extremely good at tech, extremely good on business. And Bezos is something.
It's a very inspiring choice because I've read one of the books on Amazon, and they do apparently million change managements every month. So even the change management works like a machine.
And every aspect, like the shareholder letters that Jeff Bezos has written in the past, like
Very
those are all
inspiring.
so like so much to learn from those. So it's
Very
amazing.
inspiring. Very inspiring. One book which you believe the aspiring entrepreneurs to read.
Yeah, very interesting one that I would say is Founders at Work
Founders
by
at Work.
Jessica Livingston. It's a story of a lot of founders like Apple founder and so on, Steve Wozniak and so on their journey of starting up.
Journey of starting up.
It's very good.
Fantastic. Even I have not read that. I will read that. A good habit that you have built last few months or maybe a year or so. One of the bad habits you are trying to break.
I think they're related. I'm trying to focus on my health a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think when you're building a startup, you're in the start, especially in your young time, you just forget how important health is. And as you start to age, you realize it's not about focusing on health. Like you don't want to build a gym body, but the focus on health comes because it impacts your productivity. And you start noticing the fall in your productivity because of the amount of effort you have not put in towards the health or the food that you're eating and all of this. So really trying to build that in the last few months, I'll say. But hopefully I can continue that.
Okay. One piece of advice you would give to your younger self.
And the one that I'll give is, especially in today's day and age, is be bolder.
Be bolder.
I think the world is changing faster, and you're like things that you couldn't question. You can just do things. Like that's one of the common mottos that Don't think, hey, how can this be done?
Okay,
You
yeah,
can just do
yeah.
things. Like there are people
Yeah,
building
yeah.
supersonic jets.
Yeah.
There are people building anything today. Like you can just do things. And that's one thing I really love about Silicon Valley. People just take bold bets and
Bold
you look at
bets.
those ideas and you're like, how could somebody even try this?
Try this. Yeah, yeah. So so let's overthinking. You
Yeah.
don't need so much thinking
Yeah, and I
to
think and as you age, it becomes harder
harder.
because then
Yeah.
you have know so much. You say, hey, how can you do this? This is so much
It's
effort.
so much effort
The
and
best, that's why the best founders come from a very young age because you don't think how hard is it really. You say, how hard can this be?
how
And you
it.
go in.
No, fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much, Harshil. I'm sure that many aspiring engineering folks will get inspired by this conversation, and also kind of look at your work or the work your team is doing, and also look at their career pathing, charting along with Razorpay or the new age fintech startups to make an impact, to create a really great value for themselves and the country in that sense. Thank you so much. To the viewers, thank you so much for spending time with us, and I'm sure this has been valuable to you guys. And please do let us know your feedback in the comments section, and stay tuned for many such exciting conversations. Thank you.